Good morning, everyone. As mentioned earlier, my name is Dr. Courtney Copeland, and I am a sports psychologist with psychological health and performance here in athletics, also referred to as PHP. And I am super excited to introduce our panelists, presenters, as well as this presentation that we are about to share with you all. And so this presentation examines the growing issues and scandals related to sports gambling, focusing on the mental health and financial impact of the growth of sports gambling since states were allowed to legalize sports gambling in 2018. This impact includes debt, bankruptcy, harassment of student athletes, overall well-being, and threats to integrity of competition. The presentation will look at what we can learn from the past while looking ahead to mitigate negative impacts moving forward. And so with our esteemed panelists, first I want to introduce Jared Bahir Browsh. He is an assistant teaching professor and director of the Critical Sports Studies program in the Department of Ethnic Studies. Dr. Browsh is a cultural historian, commentator, and author examining the political economics of sports and popular culture, including the relationship between culture, money, power, and identity in the United States and globally. His current work examines the history and impact of sports gambling. Also want to introduce my personal colleague, Kylie Lahey. Kylie is a University of Colorado Boulder alumna and holds a Master's of Science in Social Work from the University of Texas at Austin. She is certified in EMDR and has a strong clinical background working with athletes of all ages and skills levels, from adolescent athletes to Olympians, navigating a range of mental health challenges, including anxiety, depression, eating disorders, and stressors associated with the demands of athletic performance and sports culture. Matthew Biehl is a crisis therapist with the University of Colorado Boulder's Counseling and Psychiatric Services, also affectionately called CAPS, where he has served since 2018. He holds a Master's of Science in Marriage and Family Therapy and began specializing in the field of problem gambling in 2023. Matthew has attended the National Conference of Gambling, Addiction, and Responsible Gambling in both 2023, 2024, and plans to attend again in 2026. He is currently working towards becoming CU Boulder's first international certified gambling counselor and has recently submitted his Level 1 certification application. His clinical interests include gambling-related harm, crisis intervention, and supporting college populations through mental health challenges. And Dr. Colleen Ehrnstrom completed her education at the University of Michigan, Boston University, and the University of Colorado Boulder. For the past 25 years, she has been engaged in clinical practice, research, and teaching, serving in a variety of roles at CU since the late 90s. Currently, she is working in CAPS and teaching for continuing education. Outside of work, she enjoys watching college basketball and skiing with her family. And so please give a round of applause to our esteemed panelists for our presentation.
Hi, everybody. So I'm starting off looking at really the social impact of the legalization of sports gambling. I'm currently working on a book that looks at the entire history of sports gambling, which actually predates even the establishment of the United States, but my focus is on U.S. legalization. And so just to give you a little bit of background of the current state, that it's been a sea change since 2018 in the way we experience gambling, the way we look at gambling, and the way it impacts our lives. And even in class, the conversations around sports have changed dramatically. And even walking throughout campus, the amount of conversations I overhear about parlays, and I overhear about lines and prop bets and things like that, along with sports media itself, where you have so much attention paid to picks of the day and FanDuel sponsored or DraftKings sponsored segments and shows that before would be seen as taboo being talked about with a lack of federal legalization. And so an estimated $150 billion was gambled last year, legally. And there's another probably about 84 billion that's illegal, remembering that the two largest states by population have not legalized gambling in Texas and California. Globally, we're looking at, and that's not a typo, $1.7 trillion between legal and illegal gambling. And so this is a huge, huge market that the North American leagues jumped on very, very quickly and has impacted them both financially, but also in terms of their integrity. Each league gets about, or I should say at least $1 billion in sponsorships, ad deals, and another part of that is they actually share data with these websites and these applications, and so that allows the FanDuels, the DraftKings, the MGMs to better fix their odds for, and I don't mean fix in the sense that I'll talk about fixing later, but to set their odds is a better term in relation to the data that's shared by the leagues. Now there's questions around the revenue. Is it worth it in relation to harassment of athletes, the integrity of the games, and the larger societal impact I'll talk about in a minute. And so just to give a little bit of pre-PASPA overturn background, that this country was founded partially on money from that's the next slide. So sports lotteries existed, and obviously you could bet in Vegas, but for the most part, it was extremely limited. There were some either kind of overlooking or some exceptions for things like office pools, for fantasy sports, and other kind of toe dipping into the gambling market, which was even pushed further by daily fantasy leagues. And so this really kind of normalized gambling. And then the big kind of moment, at least in terms of shifting opinion amongst the leagues themselves, was this op-ed by Adam Silver. And so 12 years ago, Adam Silver writes this op-ed saying, okay, we need to legalize and regulate sports betting because now with the online markets, with offshore betting, things like that, we need to have some control over it. I would probably put, instead of regulate, a profit, because that was really the goal in this, is that they wanted some piece of this along with having some oversight in terms of what was going on those websites. And so very early on, I mean, from the beginning of sports, there were scandals. That the ancient Olympic Games had betting scandals where people would throw boxing matches or would lose races for exchange of money. And there's actually statues built for cheaters as a warning to future competitors not to engage in that activity. The most famous early scandal, although the first scandal in baseball was the year after the National League was founded in 1877, where a number of players were willing to throw games and almost kind of led to the end of the National League. And then you had the famous Boston College point shaving scandal in the 70s, which is a small subplot and actually part of the investigation of Henry Hill that was the subject of Goodfellas. And then we've seen recent scandals with players suspended and banned in NBA, Major League Baseball. We've had in UFC fights taken off the card for suspicious betting, and we've seen a number of NCAA scandals, including this year. And that just isn't just players. We've seen coaches, we've seen referees engage in this activity as well. One of the kind of, for some, was unexpected was how prop bets or proposition bets impacted this. And this is where we're seeing the most impropriety, where when we saw that with Jonte Porter, we saw that with Terry Rozier, where players would take themselves out of the game, tell people to bet the under before the game, and then just stepping on the court makes a bet valid. And so if a player takes themselves out and saying they're injured, and the over-under on points scored is 10, obviously they're not scoring any points, and everyone who bet the under. And the last report I saw, there was nearly 36 instances where Terry Rozier did exactly that, where he told people to bet the under, and they did so. And again, I had that figure before, but one of the other aspects of this is online gambling, and that's really where the most problems have arose, that 94% of bets are placed online. It's with us everywhere at all times. If anyone, and I asked this in class, what is some of the fastest rising sports in terms of sports gambling? People are surprised to hear it's table tennis. Because people, after the games end here in the United States, there are table tennis leagues, and it started with COVID because people had nothing else to bet on. And then after COVID, after those West Coast games at 2 a.m., people are looking at something to gamble, and Polish table tennis, for some reason, is really attractive to a lot of people. And so that's among the fastest growing sports in terms of gambling. And those, I mean, they look like prisoner videos. It's two people in a cinder block room playing table tennis with names I wouldn't even try to pronounce. And I'm Eastern European, and I'm like, and it's two people that I don't know where they come from. I don't know the league, but it's being live broadcast, and people are gambling on it. And then actually you have now people pushing back and saying, because it's also, you would imagine, easy to fix those matches as well. And so there has been some pushback on table tennis gambling. And there's the 1919 Black Sox. And that led to the creation of the commissioner's office in baseball. And so we often see kind of reactionary aspects to these issues. And so some of the arguments against legalization is the temptation for addiction is not only extremely high, but there is a documentary in the EPL called Fever Pitch, and you have a soccer player who admitted to fixing matches named Keith Gillespie, saying one of the issues with gambling is your body doesn't shut down like with substance abuse, that you just keep gambling. And the fact that many of these websites take credit cards, you can take out other forms of credit. We have people selling their cars, cashing tuition checks. And so the fact that you can keep going has been one of the biggest issues in terms of gambling. And so you also have outside influences trying to leverage information. And this is important because information is key in this. It's like insider trading, and there is kind of no conversation around where that information stops, because a friend of a player or a friend of a friend could hear, oh, he stubbed his toe, or he tried to pull something down on a shelf and it hit his head, and these are all real injury examples in sports, and no one knows yet. And actually I had that happen when I was a manager in college, where a player got injured before the tournament, and no one really knew. And ultimately, we actually had, and this was, I mean, mid-major would be a compliment to the school I worked for, but we had bookies around the team at every practice trying to see if players were limping and trying to gain an edge. And so that information is a key part of it. And something that was brought up when the NCAA was considering allowing college athletes to bet on pro sports, because they still talk to their teammates that are now in the NFL or NBA or other professional leagues. And so ultimately, there would be inside information shared along with issues with removing barriers for younger potential gamblers. And so sports are built on credibility. And so without that, you're ultimately risking your entire business. And it distracts from the sport itself. And we know the harassment of players that will be talked about throughout this, but also the questions around morality on betting on human performance and the pressure and honestly the historical issues, especially in this country, around that as well. And we've seen protections can be placed, and this is just general abuse of athletes at the 2024 Olympics, but it shows you how pervasive it is in terms of the amount of that, and this was blocked, but the amount of abuse athletes take on, and gambling only exacerbates that. And then the arguments for legalization, that it was an unfair limitation on state commerce. Since that overturned, 39 states and the District of Columbia have legalized it. Some states it's as young as 18. Most states it's at 21. And then also you get individual rights advocates pointing at it as well. It also is said, and this was part of Adam Silver's argument, it allows leagues to better track players, make sure there's no improprieties, but that's obviously a double-edged sword, as I've talked about. And then states have earned billions of dollars, about $3 billion in tax revenue based off of sports gambling. And again, this is this is in the Washington Commanders Stadium, and so there's a sports book in there, and it shows you, again, that close relationship that we're seeing. And then the data on problem gambling growth, we see the percentages that, and these are searches for help on gambling addiction. And so this is how much they're up in all these states that have legalized sports gambling. We've also seen in 3 to 4 years after a state has legalized sports gambling, we've seen a rise of between 25 and 30% in bankruptcy filings. We've also seen a credit debt rise 25% in those states as well, and an 8% increase in debt collections. And so we also have financial evidence that people are gambling way beyond their means, and they're dealing with problem gambling. And then the rise in prediction markets, and this is one area, we have a number of states suing platforms like Kalshi over prediction markets because even though you're not betting against the house, it's pari-mutuel betting. You're putting money in a pool, winner gets all, and then it's split among the winners who pick correctly. But because for some reason they consider future markets rather than gambling markets, they're right now legal in all 50 states, and states are like, this is essentially gambling. We're gambling on outcomes. And also there's a morality issue because next to gambling, who might win the next golf tournament, you have, will we bomb Iran as a prediction? And it's like, that is uncomfortable, gambling on people's lives on so many different levels and placing it on par with things like who's gonna win a Grammy? And it's like, well, who's gonna get bombed and who's gonna win Best New Artist? It's like, that's not the same, and not to say anyone should be gambling either, because inside information can be available for both. And Kalshi has been asked about that, and they're like, well, it is what it is. And it's like, no, that's not how futures markets should work. I've seen Trading Places. I know how. I'm glad some people got that joke. And so just to give you some of the numbers in terms of, again, so the handle is the total amount gambled. The revenue is how much they take in. The hold is the percentage of the revenue that comes from the handle. And so, again, we see, and you get down lower, and like there's some states where the hold is 20%. It's like, y'all not very good at this. But that's another issue. But we see like New York has a 51% tax on the revenue on sports gambling, and they've collected nearly $4 billion. And this is as of yesterday. And so also these numbers too, different states legalize at different times, and so that impacts it as well. We see Colorado's up in the top 10 as well, but we also see that they are taking in a fraction of what New York is in terms of the revenue, because it could be up closer to $1 billion, but it's much lower than the tax rate in New York. And so, again, we've seen harassment and integrity issues. Recent studies have shown in high revenue sports, as high as 1 in 3 college athletes have faced harassment. There's an increase in racial and gender-based harassment as well. And it's a temptation to be paid to act unethically, especially when you're dealing with a prop bet saying, well, it's not going to impact the team, or my team's already out of the playoffs, what difference does it make? And so, again, it's the prop bets is really where one of the main areas where we're seeing a lot of these scandals. And then a number of them, and again, the largest, I would argue, the largest modern scandal was Tim Donaghy, and that got kind of brushed under the rug. And so, again, some potential safeguards, federal oversight, limit prop bets, especially on college athletes, which Colorado does, review financial and data relationships. One of the things that came out, because we're hearing Adam Silver talk about anti-tanking rules, apparently part of that is he's being pressured by sports gambling companies to do that, to reduce load management, and to, in part, put in anti-tanking rules because it impacts the bottom line of the sports gambling companies when you know a team is not trying anymore. So it impacts over-unders, spreads, things like that. Yesterday, the state of Colorado introduced a bill that would have some safeguards on gambling addiction, including how many deposits you can make a day, and things like that. And it's kind of very, it's a start, but I don't believe it goes far enough, but it is bipartisan, and then require more public information campaigns around addiction and prevention. And so, yeah, that's it.
Hard to follow that, but here we are. Thank you all of you for being here today and having this really important conversation. Matt and I are here to talk about what's going on in the brains of our college athletes and college students as it's relating to gambling, and also what we're doing, what we're seeing via the counseling center, CAPS, where we both work. I want to start by having us connect back to when we were at the age of 18 or 19. How many of you remember feeling invincible at that age? Remember that feeling? That sense that consequences were for old people? And that sense that you had all the time and energy and excitement for the world around you? And we know that those feelings are essential for development. And we also know that it's a biological state, meaning it really reflects what's happening in the brain, that maturation process that we all go through. And it actually turns out that there's a term for this. It's called the personal fable. And it's that time of life when we collectively feel special and we feel invulnerable. Now imagine being 19 in today's world, where access to acting on these feelings is at your fingertips, and gambling opportunities are everywhere, and the companies know exactly how to target that personal fable profile. And this new world of access is exactly why this discussion today is so essential. Because 19 hasn't changed since we were in college, but gambling has. Good thing we have time. All right, how many people went to the game last night or watched it on TV? Men's basketball game, it was fabulous. Definitely some plot twists there. You could feel, the excitement, the ebb and flow. Imagine, I'm not to the next slide yet. Here we go. So imagine these two buffs. These are two of our buff students. Now, Chip is our stand-in for our amazing roster, so just imagine that he represents one of our athletes last night, and he's on the left, and he's at the free throw line with 3 seconds on the clock. And on the right, we have a student in their dorm room, and they're watching the game, and they're placing a live bet on whether that free throw is going to go in. Now, on the outside, these two people look like they're doing completely different things in completely different places. But on the inside, they actually share a lot of similarities. They're both experiencing anticipation and risk. And during those shared moments of waiting to see if the ball will drop in the basket, they're both feeling the buzz. Adrenaline, cortisol, endorphins, and of course, dopamine. Now, I want to acknowledge that there's so much more going on in the brain in this moment. We have such a complex reward system. But for our purposes in time, I want to focus on dopamine. Now, we all know it's the pleasure chemical, and it feels good. But it is so much more than that. It's also a hardwired response for survival. And it's survival through information. It's literally marking the moment, the brain saying, wait, pay attention, something happened there. I want to encode it. I want to be able to do it again. That's that reward feedback loop. Let's do it again. And the reason that these two students are similar is because in a brain scan, the free throw and the bet use the same chemical currency. The same neural hardware is processing the win. And as it turns out, it's not just the win that pushes the chemistry. Dopamine fires at a high rate for all 6 of these experiences: near misses, novelty, uncertainty, social status, risk, and cues towards predicting reward. I thought I might have to sort of convince you guys of social status, but our first speaker, Aja, I don't know where you are, but you nailed it. You crushed it. So good. Because this isn't just about feeling good. This is about survival. This is about taking care of you and yours. And this is so important to consider with the gambling process because the gambling world knows this. And their algorithms go after all of these and often at the same time. I practiced that word, Tony. It's not an easy word. Now, of course, those of us with fully developed brains, we feel that rush too. It was fun. It was exciting last night. Free throw was at 35.3 seconds, but it was the same. But we feel it differently than those young adult brains, and that matters. We call this the intensity gap or an intensity difference. The formal name is developmental reward sensitivity, if you're not into the whole brevity thing. Now, young adult brains release more dopamine in response to rewards than adult brains. So a $20 win can feel neurochemically identical to a $200 win for us. College students feel less with more, and this creates a stronger feedback loop to do it again, which means more risk for gambling problems. Now, what happens when the ball doesn't go in or you don't win the bet? You would think it would disrupt this reward center, but instead, we have the near miss effect. As you might remember, this was on the list of what really gets the dopamine firing. So the near miss, so close, I almost won, and it triggers almost as much activity as a win. It also primes the brain to want to do it again because the brain doesn't just want to win, it also wants that experience of anticipation and risk and uncertainty. Now, this might start sounding like intermittent reinforcement, which we know is at the heart of why gambling is so addictive. Because when we can't predict when the next win will be, it could very well be this one. And intermittent reinforcement and the near-miss effect are similar in that they're both driven by dopamine, and they both keep you playing long after the odds show you otherwise. They're both resistant to extinction, as the brain keeps thinking, I'm so close, this next one will be it. But they're also different, and that is based on the why. Because intermittent reinforcement is about uncertainty, and the near miss is about perceived skill. The thought that I was so close, I'm gaining mastery. It's not accurate, but it does keep the brain from feeling discouraged. Now, our fully developed adult brains start running defense here. We start simultaneously doing the math, running the probabilities, and we actually start to get discouraged despite these messages because we're modulating, we're balancing it out. But not the young adult brain. Remember that invincibility? It takes longer for them to reach discouragement. Young adult brains are still under construction. And it's really important to highlight here, dopamine is not bad. It's not the problem. Reward seeking and dopamine activation is normal and very necessary parts of the brain function. The problem is that the part of the brain that balances these processes is still developing. And those circuits that calculate risk, plan ahead, and slow down urges are not fully developed. So let's think of this as the defensive gap. The brain is physically unable to fully grasp the impact of the now with the consequences of the then. Really struggles to distinguish between a high-value opportunity and a dangerous trap. The brain is not fully capable of modulating the offense. Really difficult for it to calculate that opportunity cost. So let's circle back to our two buffs last night, and let's ask the question, how are they different? And the answer here is that the one on the left, our athlete, he's earning his dopamine hit. He has the performance profile of a top athlete. And as we all know, that is an impressive profile. That is a result of thousands of hours of effort and commitment. And we can talk about the incredible benefits of the brain for a long time and recognize that that really impacts positively in a lot of domains of life. What I really want to focus on is that it creates a unique development of agency and effort. I have the skills and I put in the work. Unfortunately, for gambling concerns, this can increase some specific risks. I want to be really clear here, I'm not dooming anybody. This is just a precursor. They're just vulnerabilities. Does not mean it's going to happen, but it is something that we should consider. And we just want to talk about three things in that performance profile that are some precursors to risk. So the first one is that agency, that skill set. And when athletes start gambling, that brain typically brings a sense of agency with them. The brain doesn't see the bet as luck. It wants to outskill it. It wants to outwork the house. And this is known as the illusion of control. And it's the brain misidentifying a game of chance as a game of skill. And the next is the effort bypass. And even though an athlete is used to working hard for a win, the gambling brain discovers it can get the same chemical reward in 30 seconds just by simply tapping on a screen. And then the final one is dopamine gap. So when a season ends or an injury happens, dopamine drops, and that reward center is going to be searching for new ways to replace it. Oh, I'm a slide behind, but you guys are all tracking, I'm sure of it. All right, in conclusion, we have a lot of data to support that the college brain is the perfect target for gambling companies. It has a reward center that's on high alert for opportunities and a stop sign that's still lagging. And I think that this suggests that our college students fall into the category of a vulnerable population. And I think that that means for us as campus stakeholders and campus partners that we need to figure out how to navigate these challenges. It's on us to support our students. Going back to the title of the presentation, what are the impacts and what are the responsibilities for our buffs and our students? Thank you.
Thank you. There's no way I'm going to be able to manage my microphone, the remote,
Validating.
and my note cards. I'll probably just end up tossing some of my note cards like David Letterman used to do on The Late Show. And if you don't know who that is or if he was before your time, well, that just saddens me. I want to give a special thanks to the... A little closer. Yeah, I'm sorry. Told you I wouldn't be able to manage. I couldn't even manage one. I want to give a special thanks to the Ph.D team for the invitation to speak on this important topic. Before they present, I want to briefly highlight what CAPS is doing to support both our rec club athletes and our broader student community when it comes to gambling. Gambling is everywhere and becoming more and more accessible. We see it at airports, casinos, social betting apps, video games, social media, and even in our office Powerball pools. I'm not judging. One of the leading experts in the gambling treatment field and a supervisor of mine, Jody Bechtold, often says, while I'm not for or against gambling, I just want help for those who need it. Yes, that would be much better. Thank you. That frees up the hand. You could have had that too. You just asked for it. Okay, so I'm just going to read that quote again. While I'm not for or against gambling, I just want help for those who need it. This is the spirit that guides our work here at CU. In a recent Times article titled "An Explosion in Sports Betting is Driving Gambling Addiction Among College Students," the rapid expansion of gambling is described as the next opiate-level public health crisis. CU is working to get ahead of this trend, and here is what we are doing. For over a year, I've encouraged CAPS staff to simply have the conversation with students about their gambling behaviors. Ask about their gambling behaviors the same way you ask about stress, sleep, academics, or substance use. Have the conversation as if someone's life depended on it, because gambling addiction has a high suicide rate of 20 or 40%. It's called the hidden addiction because it's hard to detect and easy to conceal. You have countless opportunities to have the conversation before a student's gambling becomes too severe or too devastating. And we all play a role in reducing the shame and stigma that keeps students from asking for help. So starting in fall 2024, we began at CAPS assessing every student who comes in for a screening appointment on their gambling use. Our first attempt was simple. We asked students one question: whether they have participated in gambling activities in the past year. This approach didn't work. Most students underreported and just marked no, despite research showing that approximately 75% of college students have gambled in the last year. Because of that underreporting, in fall of 25, we updated our approach on how we ask about gambling. We moved away from the single yes-no question and shifted to a modified 3-item brief biosocial gambling screen. It's called the BBGS. Instead of one vague question, we now ask students these 3 questions. There we go. During the past 12 months, have you become restless, irritable, or anxious when trying to cut down on wagering or betting on any activity for money? During the past 12 months, have you tried to keep your family or friends from knowing how much time you spend betting on any activity for money? And then last, during the past 12 months, have you had financial troubles as a result of your betting on any activity for money that you had to get help with living expenses from family, friends, or welfare? A yes to any of these 3 BBGS questions counts as a positive screen. A positive screen does not diagnose a gambling disorder. It simply indicates that students may be experiencing a gambling-related harm. More importantly, it signals to the screening clinician that this is an area to check in on. The goal is to open the door for conversation. Have the conversation. After making this switch, 3% of students have screened positive on at least one BBGS item, which is consistent with national rates of students showing early signs of gambling-related concerns. So when a student screens positive or express concerns about their gambling, our next step is to make sure that they're supported. We help students get connected to a therapist at CAPS, or when it's a better fit, to a provider in the community. We also collaborate closely with health promotions, collegiate recovery, and together we offer students education, harm reduction strategies, and ongoing support for students who want to make changes or simply talk through what they're experiencing. And for some resources for students, there are several trusted resources available for students who want support around their gambling use. The Problem Gambling Coalition of Colorado is our main statewide partner and helps connect people to education and low-cost counseling. Students can also access 1-800-GAMBLER or the National Helpline for confidential 24-hour support and referrals. For students looking for practical tools, apps like eVive, Bet Blocker, and GameBan can reduce access to gambling platforms. You simply just download those on your phone, and like NetNanny will block you from entering these sites. There are several podcasts that share real stories and expert insight, which can help reduce stigma and normalizing help seeking. Support groups like Gamblers Anonymous and GameAnon offer free confidential community support. And for students who want to take a more structured step, the Colorado Self-Exclusion Guide walks them through how to block access to casino and online gambling statewide, and that could be for a year, 5 years, or permanently. Finally, organizations like the Better Help Institute and GameFin provide specialized counseling and financial support for anyone dealing with gambling stress. Today, I extend the ask to all staff, faculty, coaches, and any student-facing professionals across campus to simply have the conversation with students about their gambling behaviors. Together, we can create campus culture where gambling concerns are met with support, not silence. Thank you.
All right, so these guys have covered a lot of really good ground, and the main reason that I'm qualified to talk to you today is because I work directly with the student athletes here at CU, so we're hearing about gambling behavior, their experiences of these bookies in their business, et cetera, pretty regularly. So to expand upon what my colleagues have shared with you today. Also, I did put Dr. Cope's name on here because she put together a lot of the information on these slides and needs the credit for it. And you crushed it. So we're just going to talk about gambling specifically for the athletes and talk about some risk factors for athletes partaking in gambling. I'm going to talk about warning signs for those of you that work with athletes or know athletes or young people in your life to pay attention to. And then it's important to talk about special population and equity considerations with gambling. And then a little bit about how to support and refer beyond what Matthew mentioned, especially for those working with athletes or college students. First, I wanted to talk about why this is important to discuss. Honestly, you guys covered quite a bit of it, but the reality is this is my 8th year working in the NCAA umbrella, and I have never heard about gambling so much in my life as I have over the past little bit. So it obviously is an increasing issue. The opportunities are expanding, as we've all seen, watching the Super Bowl, the tickers across the screen on the bottom. I mean, you can't get away from it. So if it is something that someone's dealing with, it's actually, I feel for them because it's more accessible and in your face than ever before. And our athletes are not immune to this either. So starting with risk factors for athletes. My colleagues mentioned some of this, but in particular with our athletes, this impulsivity and sensation seeking, not only is it their age, because I see some USA folks in the front too, right? We're talking with more than just college students. This is athletes of all ages prior to college, and also those that are pro and have the same age brain as myself, right? Maybe a little younger though. And so the idea is that a sensation-seeking brain, that near-miss effect, that feeling of winning, that often is what makes them really good athletes, first and foremost. We have a big correlation between some of the mental health diagnoses like ADHD that love some novelty and athlete prevalence. So athletes have this first and foremost, and it's why they have, sometimes it's why they have the drive to be really successful at sport. When it comes to stress management, athletes are under a lot of pressure. They experience a lot of stressors, and therefore gambling can be a way to just take the edge off, right? Again, it's that simple kind of just, whether it's on your phone, whether it's playing poker with the buddies, it's just an easy way to think about something else, and at a cost that doesn't feel like a cost in the moment. There is a substance use connection when it comes to gambling. This is either sometimes the same brain that may be gambling that's extra vulnerable to the negative side effects of gambling is also one that may be vulnerable to someone who's addiction prone or just substance use prone. Again, it's that novelty seeking that Colleen was talking about. And The flip side of that is that it's not uncommon to do more gambling when you are under the influence of a substance because your brain is not thinking as correctly. It may be turning off those parts of the brain that are helping you make rational decisions, and that's why they hand you free drinks at the casino, okay? It's a science. They're not dumb. And sometimes we take advantage of that, and it bites us in the end, right? And then last is, I mentioned the mental health vulnerability. Certain mental health diagnoses are correlated with that impulsivity, sensation-seeking behavior, and it can be something that just, it feels good, feels better than whatever else they're feeling, helps them deal with the stress in a different way. Oh, well, read through it, okay. Not sure what happened there with the download, all good. So athletic-specific factors, again, this performance pressure, I'm sitting here thinking as they're talking it through, we're looking at Chip up there on the line. How many athletic staff do we have in the room right now? Okay, so here for CU Boulder alone, right, those athletes, their performance, our paychecks depend on their performance, to be honest, right? There's a lot more steps in between there, but that's a lot of pressure. And so when there's performance pressure in general, it's not just them that they're playing for. It has a greater purpose, and that can be a beautiful thing. The other side of that is that's a lot of pressure to be standing on the line with in this last second free throw. And so when we talk about there's the pressures that they face in general, then you give them this opportunity to be involved in some sort of betting that they can still benefit from, that maybe is they actually benefit if they lose either way. It's kind of a win-win, and it may be more enticing to do that gambling. Additionally, long-term injury. Colleen touched on this a little bit, but the reality is that if there is that dopamine gap there with someone who's not playing right now and they're not getting their needs met as far as feeling accomplished, successful, et cetera, gambling is a really easy way to go and pull that off. And so it is not uncommon to see athletes with long-term injuries that are out of play putting more of that energy and that free time into gambling. And last, a team culture of gambling, especially for young men. I am not one, so I cannot speak to this from a personal perspective, but there's a lot more things for women to go do together, right? But men, sometimes just sitting around that poker table with your buddies, not to say women don't do this, okay? But there's something to be said about whether it's a team culture or just a general culture in our country that gambling with one another, it's just fun. It's something to do. You sit around the table and you hang out, you chat, right? It's something to do with your hands. It's a way to kind of joust, go back and forth. And if you have a team in particular that has developed a culture around gambling with one another, I mean, depending on what state you're coming from or you're in, you may have casinos right up the road, and that could be the thing that you guys do with your free time, right? And so the idea is that team culture can very quickly influence someone's opportunity to even go get involved in gambling in the first place. Then last slide of athlete-specific factors. We've talked about insider information. Can't count the number of athletes that I've had that either have had bookies in their DMs asking them questions, trying to influence things, but even more in an inadvertent way that seems innocent, like a DM that says like, oh, I was so excited to see you play last week. Why aren't you on the roster this week? Or you've been injured. Are you going to be back out there this week? They're getting information to go back and bet on that athlete's return to play, right? And that athlete is like, oh, look at my fans. My fans are so supportive. Wow, how personal is this? No, this person is taking advantage of your kindness and your inbox. And so I think this insider information, as we've seen with the back and forth with our departments about whether or not employees should be and athletes should be allowed to bet on pro sports as well. Yes, there's still people that we follow through for the rest of their lives, especially in my role. Okay, there's, I have a legal obligation to confidentiality, but it's one of those things where if we were given the opportunity to bet on those things, we have way too much information to make that fair nor healthy for us. And so I think, again, it's all, if you limit the access, it makes it more difficult, right? And it sends a message around what should or shouldn't happen, but there is so much insider information that that would become the priority of these games more than the pure benefits of sport at their core, which is that accomplishment and just watching the human body do amazing things. NIL money and financial stress. So the first part, athletes are getting more money than they have ever received before, and it is a young brain, and our departments are rapidly trying to build the infrastructure around how to support them with that money, right? This just got kind of thrown on us, and then all of a sudden we're responsible for teaching them how to deal with millions of dollars at this age. The other side of that, depending on who you're talking to, they may experience financial stress. They may be here sending money back home because they are the breadwinner for their family now. And if you give somebody the opportunity to quickly multiply their money, and if their priority is their family and their financial stress or their individual financial stress, it is going to be really difficult to make a decision that is in their best interest when that kind of money might be on the line in the click of a button, right? And then the last, these high-profile sports visibility, I just mentioned people in their DMs. It's easier than ever to get a hold of them, and there's just more opportunity than ever to gamble on any parts of these games, right? Even like the color of what jerseys they might be wearing, you know, what's Oregon's jersey gonna look like this week, right? I don't know. There's so much that people can bet on, and then these athletes are at the heart of those things that are being bet on with a lot of money around it. Environmental factors, I mentioned targeted advertising. It's everywhere right now. You see billboards, it's on your screen during these events. And they know who they're looking for, right? These young brains, and our phones know way too much about us, even if we do everything right. So there's something to be said about they're gonna know who's in the proximity of a certain location who might want to bet on a game to begin with, right? That accessibility of mobile betting, that speaks for itself. Moving right along, campus culture and social norms. If you have a campus, campuses that have a higher focus on sport, or just, you know, the athletics are better, it's part of the team culture, automatically that's building an environment that is riskier for gambling behavior, controlled or uncontrolled, and then just social norms around it. Again, if it's, I mean, we were just joking before this, I was like, you know, joking with some people, like, are you gonna put bets on how long I talk today, right? If it's a social norm between your friends, it feels good to have some fun, some anticipation. It can come at a cost. So here are some warning signs for you all to look out for. These are, you know, within your personal relationships, but especially when you're working with athletes as well. If you start to see changes in mood, behavior, and reliability, that could be a lot of things, right? In general, that could be last time you ate. But in this case, when we're talking about gambling, it can also be the idea that something has shifted in this person's priorities, and that it may be, if we're talking about someone who's struggling with a gambling addiction or behavior, they may be upset about something happening with gambling. They may be that reliability. They may just start to not care about anything but gambling the next time they can gamble. And you may start to notice just they're not being themselves. Sudden financial distress, or asking teammates for money when you know that they make plenty, or that they may not, right? That's an indicator that all of a sudden their money went somewhere. Where did it go? Very well could be gambling. Again, ask the question. Curious, well, where'd your money go? What you been doing with it? And then a decline in academic focus or attendance. They may be staying up late, playing, like gambling, just having fun, being social with their friends. But if that becomes addicting, they may be skipping class because they're sleepy. They may be late to workouts, struggling, etc. And again, ask the question, what's going on? What's getting in the way? Then we've got game specific as well, heightened anxiety around game outcomes. We looked at our chip up there on the screen. If they're really concerned about game outcomes more than ever before, that is curious. What changed, right? You normally are pretty level-headed about this. Why is it that you're so nervous about this regular season game, right? Or the higher the pressure goes for the game, right? The finals of March Madness, that's high pressure as it is, let alone if you're trying to put money on it or got someone in your life who's putting money on it as well. Then again, borrowing money and harassment from fans or bettors. I love to spread the gospel about how much is in these athletes' DMs all the time, because people don't understand just how harassed they get on a lot of fronts, and we have an opportunity to really support them in how they respond to that, and then how we protect them in that. So we're talking about population and equity considerations. First, international student athletes. We have a different gambling culture here than maybe other places in the world. That can look like they gamble more there or less, but nonetheless, they're coming here, they're adapting to a new norm. And hey, if they get invited to something that feels good and they're connected to community, this may be a really vulnerable time and space for them. Side note, the NCAA did a giant, really impressive survey on gambling behavior in athletes, and they just re-upped it in 2024. And there's a lot of statistics there, and for the sake of time, I'm not going into them, but if you want to go look more about the shifts in behavior over time, it's very well laid out. And essentially, international student athletes, there is an uptick in reported gambling behavior, especially from Canada, which was interesting to me. Then female student athletes, we talk about men as a gambling problem as a men's problem, but I'm guilty of this, this whole presentation, right? And female student athletes, they're often under-identified, and that means they are actually more likely to become addicted to gambling because no one really intervenes in the beginning. So it's good to know this doesn't just apply to men. It's female athletes, same type of brain, just as risky, no matter the sex. And then last, high-profile sports athletes, again, just under a lot of pressure, have a lot of opportunity to control how games go, and we want to make sure we're guiding them in the right direction with that support. Also, students with limited financial literacy, you give them all this money, no one's told them how to save it, the ideas of saving it. Why not just spend it right now? It feels good, you could get rich quick, sign me up, right? Next one, these students navigating NIL income. We've said that 100 times, but let's work on controlling that a little bit better and helping them prepare for post-grad, post-play, retirement, whatever that is. And then last, just the cultural stigma around gambling or help-seeking. That help-seeking is especially important. If you come from a culture where help-seeking is taboo still or frowned upon, then you may experience you don't want to tell people that this gambling has kind of gotten out of hand. Or no one might tell you that it has because no one's ever talked about it before. So, tiny bit, how to ask non-judgmental supportive questions. Watch your tone, get curious, right? We're not here trying to judge or shame. It's just, hey, you've been talking about financial issues. What's been going on, right? Approach with care. If you don't feel like you're the best person to ask that question, maybe loop someone in that you feel like has that relationship with this person. And then if a student discloses these risk behaviors, confidentiality versus required reporting, that is going to depend on your department and who you work for. And like in my world, I can't do anything about that. I'm going to help them directly, but someone else on campus may actually be required to report that information. And then last, there could be times in which it's important to involve compliance or higher administration based on what you're hearing in an athletic department space. I know we have some compliance here in the room. I would let them talk to that more, but I just know that in general, if we're hearing about it, we got to get in front of it. And that's important to remember. In our space, we're a completely confidential entity, psychological health and performance here for our athletes. So they have a space to come in and talk to us and talk about whatever it is they need help with. And then, as they mentioned, CAPS on campus for non-varsity athletes are available and obviously have some really well-qualified, certified people to help support these ventures. Thank you. How much time do we have for questions, Courtney? Any? At
least 7 to 10 minutes.
7 to 10? Great. If there are any questions, I'll let Courtney moderate questions because she's the boss.
Yes, living out my talk show host dreams. And so we do ask, if you do have a question, please raise your hand. We will come and give you the mic. It is important that you do speak into the mic so that our viewers on Zoom can hear your questions and allow the panel to answer them. And if you have something specific for a specific panelist, please ask them directly so that they can pass the mics around. And also, if you are on Zoom, feel free to type your questions into the chat. Does anyone have any questions to start us off with?
Thank you. I forgot your name. CAPS.
guy. Yes, Matthew. You had mentioned that 3% of students report or screen for some sort of gambling issue, or I'm not sure exactly how, that's probably not how you phrased it, but
That was close enough that we
Okay.
started screening. 3% of students that we've screened in the last year, so fall and so far in this semester, have marked at least one of those yes, which just indicates that they have been gambling and they may be ready to talk about it.
is it student athletes or students in general?
That's students. At CAPS, we don't see the athletes.
We can, but they have PHP.
So it's lower in athletes. Would you suspect that it's lower in athletes? Has it been measured or?
Is that on to you for that question?
We don't measure for it here in a way that I could give you that data, and I don't know, the NCAA, that handout, if you just Google NCAA gambling 2024, is a plethora of information. I don't know, do you know, Courtney? Courtney might have the answer to this, actually.
As of right now, we aren't currently collecting that data in PHP. However, the overall NCAA data does speak to that it being kind of similar and equivalent in that space as far as problem gambling. Now, we are seeing just anecdotally higher prevalence of gambling and it becoming a much more normalized behavior. However, problem gambling, we aren't seeing anything outside of what we're seeing in the general population currently. Those numbers could change because they are currently collecting that data.
I just want to add too, just to separate gambling from sports gambling, because there is a higher rate because of the competitive nature, as described by the other presentations. That there is, I mean, Michael Jordan is famous for, and so gambling, and the thing is, one of the triggers of problem gambling is financial issues, and obviously, especially high-level athletes in the professional ranks don't. It takes a lot longer or takes a lot more, but there is evidence that in gambling in general, that there are higher rates because of the same competitive nature and the environments, as a lot of people brought up, team planes, team bus trips, things like that. And so yeah, I just wanted to add kind of that separator, but there is evidence of general gambling being higher amongst athletes.
Okay, we got a question on this side of the house.
I guess just to the panel as a whole, I think we can all agree that this is becoming more of an issue, to not call it like a straight up outright, like this is a problem. But where does this stop and who steps in to stop it? Sports leagues, individuals, government, what do we think?
Yes. Everyone needs to be, I mean, the fact that we don't have federal laws is part of the issue. That there needs to be more oversight of the applications. I mean, the thing is, I mean, the reason why I point at federal oversight is leagues are not famous for saying no to money. And so when you're talking about the NFL, of their $23 billion they make a year, $2 billion is off of gambling. They all make money off of it. Someone needs to step in and say there needs to be some limitations. Charlie Baker was in Congress saying we need to get rid of prop bets on college. And so they all need to look at themselves. And I'm especially critical of Adam Silver in this because basketball is the most ripe for integrity issues, and he's the one pushing it hardest, and it seems like the gambling companies are the most in his ear, and he has the most to lose, and there's other issues. I have issues with the way he's handling the WNBA labor issue as well, but ultimately they all need to be involved now, and they should have been involved 6 years ago.
And I just want to add, I don't mean to sound doomed, but we're not going to stop it.
Yeah.
It's not going to stop. There's too much money there. It's going on. I'm supportive for those that want help. Let's educate. Let's have conversations about it. Take away the shame. It's okay. Come talk to us and just be educated around what's out there for supports. Different people are going to need different levels of support, right? Like for a lot of people, it's just like turning on a light switch. When you want to gamble, you gamble. When you don't want to gamble, you stop. Others can't stop, and that's where we're here to support those.
Thanks. To add on to what you were saying about the resources, are there anything in particular that you guys have done with either varsity athletes or not that you've seen as most effective? Any exercises, any resources that they use most often, by chance?
I think a lot of similar tools that operate with an addiction model would be what I would, education is my first order of business always. So that education model, behavior replacement, and harm reduction. So just decreasing the behavior and then substituting it with other life-giving behaviors with maybe less vulnerable risks to it. That's a really broad answer to your question, but that has seemed to work. And just other avenues to find the similar outcome of the root of why ever they're participating in the problem gambling.
Yeah, totally nailed it. Just when dealing with 18, and it is 18-year-olds who are gambling, even though legal age is 21, trust me, they are gambling. They find ways to get around the law. The best thing to do is, I don't know if a lot of you have success telling 18 to 21-year-olds what not to do. They're going to do it harder. So you have to meet them where they're at. Do they want to completely stop gambling, or they just want to like cut it back? So it's working around that kind of mindset is a lot more beneficial. Having them just have a new insight where if you are going to gamble, you're going to have to budget for it, just like you will for dating or for clothes or for your new shoes. You have to have gambling money too, and when that money's gone for the month, you're done.
I'm going to add, I would lower the age. I mean, high schools are dealing with a serious issue of kids gambling. And I think part of this is too, is it's not just, I mean, obviously 94 is through the apps, but they also have this access to the lines, to the money, and so there's also interpersonal gambling that's going on as well. And so, I mean, there is no age, and way too many, not just, I mean, again, 18-year-olds are, it's illegal in this state, but there's 13, 14-year-olds, if not younger, that are engaging in this, and it's a serious problem.
Colleges are really focused on the portrait of a graduate and preparing people for success in life and the skills and competencies they need to have. When you think about what a portrait of a graduate in a legalized gambling world looks like, you know, what would you hope that we would define?
Oh, wow. They're handing the mic to me. I mean, this is the question, right? Absolutely. I think it comes down to really feeling like people are figuring out how to have agency with access. You know, I think it's not going away. It's can continue to increase, and that ability to go through, you know, those moments, those choice points, and really feel like you're scaffolded when your brain isn't modulating, and then you're modulating when your brain is fully on, and then you're in an environment and a community that's really supporting like-minded experiences. I mean, we talk about graduating a student, but we also talk about alums, right? And it's really interesting with the NIL money, like which school am I now going to have an alum with? So not only do you have a tie to your own experience and what you have learned and how you've evolved, but you're tied to your community as well. And so I think when we've got a community, when we've got a campus that is teaching certain cultural values, that's something that we really could sort of instill in these young adults that then they take out into the world.
I think too, it's just, especially I came out of critical media studies, and so we need, I mean, critical thinking. We know kind of the fully formed brain at 25, things like that, but FanDuel's not your friend. FanDuel, like, the incredible presentations after me really point out that this reward aspect of this, but we need them to be more critical in general about what's being advertised to them, and that includes the upteenth Jamie Foxx advertisement, or I mean, it's everywhere. It's on the court. It's on billboards, and so I think making critical of whether it's a larger capitalism or critical of media is something that has been a larger issue in terms of education, and it'd be great that if again it would impact this as well.
We have another question.
So I work with first-year students, predominantly first-year students, engineering students out in Williams Village. So I'm really curious from your perspective, what are either things that you've tried, right? Recognizing first year is like their entry into college, and especially you're mentioning how gambling is not only a college issue, probably, especially with the pervasiveness of technology these days. So kind of what have y'all have tried or what you've seen other campuses do around, like, what are some interventions that can happen from a proactive lens versus like reactive, like where students are at the very end realizing this is an issue or I'm having debt and things like that. So what are some kind of proactive things that you've seen been effective to better inform our students?
I have two thoughts. One is anecdotal, and then one is maybe a little bit bigger picture, so I'll start there. To add some more language to what we've already said, I think one of my philosophies is helping people help themselves. And so, especially for first years, helping them to figure out, giving them the education and information around where gambling can head. What are the risk signs for yourself to notice? Oh, I'm becoming more unreliable. I'm skipping class for this, et cetera. Getting in front of it that way, I think, is helpful so that they can make more informed decisions for themselves. Or what are some harm reduction methods? I'm sitting here thinking of the ways that our society has managed the campaigns against smoking and long-term impacts, or I'm even thinking too, like how people know how much caffeine they can or can't handle, right? Like those are things you develop over time with your own insight, and sometimes that's because you did too much and you got to back it off, and then sometimes it's being upfront about why you don't even want to get into it. So there's that. From another practical perspective, and I wish I remember exactly how they did this, but when I used to work at University of Texas, they had our phone numbers or something, and there was a a geo fence basically, and if there was any sort of activation of that app from our phones, from our IP addresses, it went to somebody and you'd get in trouble. And so I don't know if it's, hey, various options out there, but there are ways to prevent or either to give feedback of who is gambling and then even put a fence around what they can and can't do. That's above my pay grade or my technical expertise, but that's just an idea. Just people knew who was gambling.
Yeah. Checks and balances.
Yes.
I just want to add to that. So I work in the embedded program in CAPS where we've got providers engaged with each of the colleges, and I'm embedded in the program in exploratory studies, which is also a first year experience. I want to give props to what they're doing out at Willville. Both exploratory studies and the first year engineering experience are both teaching 1-credit classes in the first year experience. And they are talking about academic progress, how to track, how to have calendars, but they're also talking about resources. And we know that first year students across the entire nation are the least likely to seek our resources, mental health and campus resources. There's a lot of reasons for that, but one of the things that these first year classes are doing is they're also just reminding them of these resources and recognizing that we have to be ready a little bit past when we would hope they would come in. And there is no shame in that, but they wait until they're really in a place of pressure and then they come to us. But I think what you guys are doing with the first year experience in those classes is just really essential.
I think one more thing is peers, and I think the other presentations touched upon this, is also recognizing and often coming from a peer, because the same education around problem drinking or noticing like a possible dangerous situation at a party, things like that. So having understanding kind of that building of the social group in that first year, but also having them, especially when you're spending such time with a roommate or a social group, much like we do with other substances and other dangerous situations. I think noticing and the great presentations after me pointed out these warning signs is have peers understand what those warning signs are, and again, simply as asking for money, or also kind of more obvious mental health kind of outwardly displays as well. And so peer support is a big area that seems to benefit in many different experiences.
And I think this is I think this is a very timely conversation for us to be having about an issue that is obviously growing in prevalence as well. And so I just want to thank so much all of our presenters, all of the wonderful information that they shared today, as well as all of your engaging questions and conversation that we've been able to have. And I hope that this is also just the start of the conversation, and it empowers you a little bit to engage more, like we said, like Matthew specifically said, of like asking the questions, showing up for those individuals. This problem doesn't look like it's going anywhere, so then how do we want to confront it as individuals that work in, with, and around athletes and athletics? So thank you all, and let's give a hand for our presenters.